The DePaul Art Museum has a new slate of exhibits this fall, and as I found out, they're truly unique. The president spoke at a meeting with the police chiefs at McCormick Place this morning and held a fundraiser for the 2020 election shortly after, right here at Trump Tower. Tunnel flight is a sport available for all ages, the young, the old, and even those who are afraid of heights. Even I had my chance to get inside the tunnel for a little bit. A Boston man not only ran the Chicago Marathon, but on the same day helped prevent a possible shooting aboard the CTA Blue Line. And it was all caught on video. Though it's extremely important to be able to prevent measles before it happens, it's also important to recognize when you do have it. Measles starts with a sore throat, runny nose, red eyes, cough, and eventually becomes a rash. Some severe complications that can arise from measles include pneumonia as well as brain swelling. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is calling for an increase in taxes on rideshare services. The tax would affect single passengers and rides that begin or end downtown. With the 2020 presidential elections coming up, many voters are wondering whether or not Trump's rhetoric will affect his re-election, and if he set a troubling example for future presidents. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar. Today marks the first day of Chicago's citywide teacher strike, leaving classrooms empty and parents scrambling to make arrangements for their children. Yesterday, Mayor Lori Lightfoot announced that all Chicago public schools will be closed while city officials and union leaders negotiated the teachers' next contract. It left many wondering just how we got to this point.
We all would rather be teaching our classes right now, but we feel like this is important for the city to hear that we need real improvements in the schools and we need a just contract settlement.
After months of slow negotiations between the teachers' union and city officials, tensions came to a head the day before the strike. The city's best offer was a 16% average raise on salaries over the next 5 years.
At every turn, we bent over backwards to meet the union's needs and deliver a contract that reflects our shared values and vision for our schools and the support of our students.
The union countered with an average raise of 15% over the next 3 years and guarantees of smaller class sizes, more special needs aides for schools, as well as more nurses and librarians. Among these issues, teachers came to show support for the strike on behalf of other issues important to them, such as funding for bilingual education.
I believe that bilingual education is worth striking for. This is the first time that we have contract proposals that name bilingual education, because our contract up to this point is 2019 and we have no contract language surrounding bilingual education. And I think that's a travesty when a third of all the English learners in the state of Illinois are in Chicago public schools.
As you can see by the massive turnout here today, employees and teachers agree that the city's offer is just not enough to sustain throughout the rest of the school year. Nearly 350,000 students and families are affected by the school closures today. And without further negotiations from the city, we can expect the strikes to continue. Mayor Lightfoot says the teachers' demands will cost the city roughly $2.5 billion over the next 5 years. A sum that, at this moment, the city cannot afford. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar. Thousands of people protested Donald Trump's first visit to Chicago since his time in office. The president spoke at a meeting with the police chiefs at McCormick Place this morning and held a fundraiser for the 2020 election shortly after, right here at Trump Tower. DePaul journalism professor and former ABC News correspondent Chris Bury is not surprised by the negative attitude many Chicagoans have expressed toward Trump's visit.
He's used Chicago as a punching bag. He's criticized the crime, saying that we have the weakest gun laws in the country, which isn't true. He's also said that people were murdered here during Obama's inaugural festivities, which wasn't true. So he has told falsehoods about the city of Chicago, and people are angry about that.
During his speech to the nation's police chiefs, Trump referred to Afghanistan as a safe place by comparison to Chicago. Trump also heavily criticized Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson, who chose not to attend the president's speech, with Johnson saying, "It doesn't line up with our city's core values, along with my personal values." Trump lashed out at Johnson on crime.
People like Johnson put criminals and illegal aliens before the citizens of Chicago, and those are his values, and frankly, those values to me are a disgrace.
Later that same day, Johnson responded to Trump's comments saying he would not get caught up in negativity.
You know, it's the national narrative that Chicago is a city on fire is just simply not true. We have our challenges on the south and west side, but I want to remind people that we also have 17 neighborhoods in this city that are safer than Manhattan and LA. And I think, you know, getting caught up in negativity has just never been something that I do, and I'm certainly not going to do it now.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot also tweeted a response to Trump's criticism of Johnson, saying, "President Trump knows as much about policing as he does running a fair and transparent government. I stand by the superintendent for living up to the values of this great city and its residents."
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Meanwhile, late in the day, thousands of demonstrators gathered near Trump Tower protesting against Trump and his policies.
So disheartening, so deeply, deeply disheartening to think that you're in a place in this country as a whole and it's not where we are. And so people need to get motivated and get more involved in the political process.
President Trump spent about half the day here in Chicago, heading back to Washington late this afternoon. Protests continued in the Loop for a few hours after his departure. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise.
During his 3 years in office, many have criticized President Trump for making racially charged comments and encouraging others to make such comments. They feel it's fueling racism in this country.
What's interesting about Trump is that nothing he says is particularly new in terms of what the Republican Party has represented for a long time. The way he says it is less guarded. So I think in terms of talking about race, well, the Republican Party has been a party based on issues of race for, since the 1960s.
Trump has repeatedly denied accusations of racism and bigotry. In fact, he's called himself
the least racist person there is anywhere in the world.
With the president's approval rating at about 40%, some view Trump's rhetoric towards minorities and ethnic groups as hate speech. Sheree Corbin, a junior at DePaul, thinks the problem with Trump's speech, and hate speech in general, is how it's expressed.
It's not about your beliefs, because no one believes the same thing. It's about how you express them and how you respect others who don't believe the same thing that you do.
Earlier this year, controversy erupted between Trump and the so-called Squad in the House of Representatives, a group of 4 new congresswomen, all of them minorities. In a tweet, the president said the 4 should go back to where they came from. Some feel Trump's comments may have encouraged the gunman who killed 22 people this past August at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. They feel a president should bring people together, not divide them. With the 2020 presidential elections coming up, many voters are wondering whether or not Trump's rhetoric will affect his re-election, and if he set a troubling example for future presidents. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar. Though skydiving is an adventure on most people's bucket lists, not many know that you can get the same exact rush of adrenaline indoors. iFly Lincoln Park is one of 40 locations in the United States dedicated to the sport of indoor tunnel flying. William Newberry, a 3-year iFly instructor, says that tunnel flight is a sport not many people are aware of.
We're misrepresented. Basically, people don't realize this is an actual sport. So a lot of people come here for the first time and they don't realize that they could keep doing this. And that's been like our goal was to push this as a sport itself. We're trying to get in the next Olympics. Hopefully we can do that. But we're just pushing it as a sport.
Also known as body flight, tunnel flight differs from outdoor skydiving in a few key ways. Flight instructor Dan Wilsey says participants experience more thrills in tunnel flight.
This is the only place you'll get a sensation, I feel like, of actually going up. Right, in skydiving, it's falling faster or slower or faster, right? Here, you actually get to have like the sensation like you're getting higher, so it's super cool.
Once you enter the tunnel, air from the bottom of the tunnel pushes up on flyers to suspend them in air. The wind levels in the tunnel are controlled by an instructor and vary in strengths based on your skill level and just how high you want to fly. Tunnel flight is a sport available for all ages, the young, the old, and even those who are afraid of heights. Even I had my chance to get inside the tunnel for a little bit. Many of the workers at iFly are licensed skydivers. They recommend that if you want to skydive, tunnel flying before taking your first jump is a great mental and physical warm-up. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar. The DePaul Art Museum has 3 new exhibitions this fall: Julia Fish, Bound by Spectrum, Architectural Annotations, and Remember Where You Are. The exhibitions opened on September 12th and all consider the influence of architecture, geography, and place on individual narratives and experiences.
The exhibition that I am currently sitting in right now, Remember Where You Are, was a project that really began about 2 years ago, and it was born out of my interest in how generationally and culturally people were thinking about geography and identity.
Remember Where You Are features the work of 2 artists from San Antonio and 2 from Chicago. This exhibition was curated to provide a platform for these 4 emerging artists to share stories about place and identity. Julia Fish, Bound by Spectrum, exhibits the work of Chicago artist Julia Fish, whose work spans 4 decades and focuses on the different elements of architecture in her home.
And that exhibition takes a close look at the architecture of Julia's home and the passage of time as it affects her perception of time and space.
Along with her solo exhibition, Fish also guest curated a selection of works on paper from the DePaul Art Museum's permanent collection that can be found in the Architectural Annotations exhibit. Fish said, quote, "The works on paper that I have selected for the Architectural Annotations reflects a fortunate circumstance in terms of my own biography. That is, my interest in architecture and architectural drawings, in music, and the invitation to offer a context for the work in DePaul Art Museum's permanent collection." This exhibition is also a community anchor site for the Chicago Architectural Biennial, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating an international forum on architecture and urbanism. This is the 2nd year that DePaul Art Museum has been an anchor site for the biennial.
And it allows us to kind of take some of the themes and ideas that are central to the Architecture Biennial and its mission and bring them to the DePaul campus.
These exhibitions will be on display at the museum through February 23rd of next year. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Mariam Mackar.